It all started with a dream. A small factory, the smell of grease and metal, workers forging the future from morning till night. Volkswagen wanted to become a symbol of hope, a car for the people, a sign of rebirth after dark times. It was a start from nothing, and a path to universal love. But it all ended in a completely different way. A loud scandal, shattered illusions, billion-dollar fines, and most importantly, the lost trust of millions of people. What began as a symbol of purity and simplicity turned into a word that still sounds like a sentence: Dieselgate. This story is like a roller coaster. From admiration to contempt, from applause to stones. And it's not just about cars. It's about people, about our temptation to embellish the truth to look better, and about how difficult it is to correct the consequences. Listen further, because this is a story in which the world first believed until its last breath, and then turned away in anger. Imagine Germany in the 1930s. The streets still remember hunger, devastation, and despair. People want the simple things: bread on the table, work in their hands, and hope in their eyes. And amidst this chaos, an idea is born: to make a car accessible to everyone. Not for the rich, not for the generals, but for ordinary families who dream of travel, freedom, and a better tomorrow. This car was called Volkswagen, car for the people. A small factory, the roar of iron, the smell of fresh paint and hot metal. Workers in blue overalls assemble part by part, and above all this hangs a dream: to create something that will change the lives of ordinary people. Sounds romantic, right? And indeed, in those early years, everything looked like the birth of a new symbol. But the reality was more complicated. This beginning was overshadowed by politics. Volkswagen was not born in a vacuum. It was part of a large propaganda machine that was being built at the time. Therefore, the company's first steps were difficult, mixed. On the one hand, the sincere faith of engineers and workers in their work. On the other, the shadow of a system that used this dream for its own interests. And then war broke out, and with it came ruins. Factories were reduced to rubble. Thousands of workers were left with nothing. The dream of a car for the people seemed to have burned down in the flames of bombing. But here begins what always makes the stories of great brands special: perseverance. In a post-war Germany that lay in ruins, a few people decided not to let go of this idea. They said to themselves, "We will rebuild. We will start from scratch." And it was then, among the ashes, that a legend began to be born again. Volkswagen survived. The plant came to life. Cars started rolling off the assembly line again. And the first symbol of the revival was the Beetle, which later became a legend. It was the moment when a small dream, born in the darkness, began to come to light. People got behind the wheel again. They hit the roads again. They felt freedom again. But, as we know, every dream has its price. And time will show that even the most beautiful beginning can turn into a completely different ending. Imagine a country in ashes. Germany after the war was a city in ruins, roads broken, families without homes. The Volkswagen factories lay almost in ruins. People looked at these ruins and asked themselves, is it possible to revive something from this chaos? And here comes a figure who will play a key role: British officer Ivan Hurst. He was given the task to deal with this dilapidated factory. Many believed that it should simply be closed. But Hurst saw something more in these walls. He saw an opportunity. The scene is one that one can imagine: a huge workshop, empty, with broken windows. On the ground are broken glass and rusted metal. Hurst walks through this darkness and says, "We will build." It was the moment when the stranger actually gave Volkswagen a second life. So the first Volkswagen Beetle began to rise from the ruins. Small, round, simple, but with character. At first, these cars seemed almost ridiculous among the big American cars. But then people fell in love with them. Imagine youth in the USA in the 60s. Sun, rock and roll, freedom at full volume. And in the midst of all this, a small Beetle. It becomes a symbol of a generation. A car that does not flaunt its size or power, but simply gives the joy of the road. Volkswagen became a legend. And it was a real miracle. From the ruins of war to a symbol of peace and freedom, people saw in it something more than a car. They saw in it proof that even when everything seems lost, you can start from scratch and become even stronger. But success always brings new challenges. And soon Volkswagen had to prove that it was not just a symbol of the past, but also a competitor of the future. When the Beetle became an iconic car, the world had no idea that Volkswagen would become a giant in a few decades. But it was at this moment that the company took its most important step. It began to think not just as a manufacturer of one car, but as a brand that could embody German quality itself. The scene, a huge boardroom in Wolfsburg. People in suits sit around a table, and among them is the phrase, "We have to look beyond today. We have to create the future." This is not just business talk. This is strategic vision. Thus is born the era of new models, new technologies, new factories. Volkswagen begins to expand all over the world. From Europe to America, from Latin America to Asia. Wherever you go, you see the little VW logo. And here's the important thing. The company began to be associated with reliability. People said, "This is a German car. It will last." And that was Volkswagen's main trump card. Imagine the roads of Western Europe in the 70s. Asphalt that smells of rain, gasoline at gas stations, and dozens of different cars next to you. But Volkswagen was different. It didn't scream design, it wasn't ostentatious. It was practical, honest, hearty. That's what won the hearts of millions. But times were changing. New topics began to appear on the horizon. The energy crisis, rising oil prices, the first conversations about ecology. And Volkswagen understood. If it wanted to remain a symbol of the future, it had to become a symbol of cleanliness as well. And that's when the company had a new ambition, to create a clean diesel. A car that delivers power, economy, and at the same time saves the planet. It sounded beautiful. It looked like the future. Back then, no one suspected that this very dream would one day become the cause of the greatest disgrace in the company's history. Late 90s, early 2000s. The world is talking about climate change, greenhouse gases, the future of the planet. The auto industry is under pressure. American companies are dreaming of hybrids. The Japanese are creating the first Prius. And then Volkswagen declares, "We have our answer. Diesel can be clean." It sounded revolutionary. After all, diesel has traditionally been associated with trucks, with dirty exhaust, with smoke. But VW promises, "We will change the perception. Our cars will be powerful, economical, and at the same time, environmentally friendly." Imagine the scene of a presentation. A conference room in Los Angeles, journalists holding cameras, spotlights flashing. A shiny Passat with a clean diesel sign drives onto the stage. People applaud. Some even stand up. It feels like a new era. And indeed, the numbers were impressive. Sales were up. The ads showed happy families on green meadows, with cows grazing in the distance and children running around. A car in the frame, and behind it a clear blue sky. The slogan sounded confidently. Clean diesel, a clean future. The world believed. Journalists wrote enthusiastic articles, and consumers chose Volkswagen, thinking, "I'm not only saving fuel, I'm also saving the environment." And it was probably the strongest wave of confidence the company had experienced since the Beetle. But in parallel, something else was happening behind the scenes. The engineers understood, making diesel really as clean as promised was almost impossible. Technology had not yet caught up with marketing dreams. The pressure was enormous. Management demanded results. Either you do it, or we will lose the market. And that's when the solution that would change everything was born in the offices. A small line of code in the car's system that understood during tests that the car was being inspected and understated its emissions. It was the very deception device. From that moment on, the company stood on the edge. On the outside, a symbol of a green future. On the inside, a ticking time bomb that was ticking ever louder. No one knew it then. The world applauded, and Volkswagen was already on the brink of the biggest scandal in its history. 2015. The world had grown accustomed to believing in clean diesel. Volkswagen sold hundreds of thousands of cars in the US, Europe, and Asia. The ads continued to show green meadows and happy children. And in people's hearts lived the certainty. We were driving the cars of the future. But the truth had a way of emerging when it was least expected. It all started with a group of American researchers. They were tasked with testing the emissions levels of German cars on ordinary roads. Not in a laboratory, not under control, but where each of US drives, on highways, in cities, among traffic lights and traffic jams. And here comes the moment of truth. They connect the devices, start the engine, and see that the numbers don't match. The car that showed cleanness in the test was actually emitting dozens of times more harmful gases. Picture this scene: a small group of scientists in the field. A gray Golf is parked on the side of the road, the engine humming. The instruments are flashing red. One of the researchers takes off his glasses and says, "This can't be a mistake. Someone has tricked us." The news reaches the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. An investigation begins. Volkswagen is summoned for interviews, peppered with questions. At first, the company remains silent, hoping that everything can be shut down. But the evidence is becoming louder and louder. And then, in September 2015, the same word would be uttered that would change everything: Dieselgate. The scandal explodes like a bolt from the blue. Television shows footage of cars with the VW logo, and announcers talk about the biggest fraud in the history of the auto industry. People feel cheated. After all, they believed. They believed that they were leading a clean future. And now they understand. They were simply used. The company's shares are falling. Billions disappear from the market value in a matter of days. In the streets, outraged car owners demand explanations. On social media, VW becomes a symbol of lies. And the biggest blow is not the fines, not the financial losses. It is the trust that crumbles like glass underfoot. The world that applauded yesterday is spitting today. And Volkswagen must take the stage, no longer as a winner, but as a culprit. Remember that moment when the lights went out on stage? That was the feeling at Volkswagen. A scandal erupted, and the light that illuminated them as a leader suddenly went out. The scene: a boardroom in Wolfsburg. A large table. A few empty chairs. Once upon a time, companies were decided here. Now people are silent. Someone is squeezing a coffee cup so hard that it creaks. Someone is looking out the window at the factory chimney, from which the Pride Parade once flowed. The chimney is silent. Outside, police, regulators, journalists. Inside, shock. Leaders who yesterday gave brilliant speeches are now answering tough questions. Television cameras are relentless. Every step is recorded. Every word is as if under a microscope. Resignations are beginning. Names that embodied success are disappearing from titles. Managers are writing statements. Faces these days look tired and empty. This is not just a personnel reshuffle. It is a symbol of the end of an era. People who carried the brand's banner find themselves under the weight of guilt. Financial blows are becoming physical. Stocks are falling. Billions are going nowhere. Bank statements are dismal. Investors are silent, or they ask, how could this have been allowed to happen? There is nervous anticipation in factories. Will there be layoffs? Will they close shops? Workers who built cars by hand feel the chill of fear. After all, it is not their fault. Everyone is paying. Lawsuits are starting to be heard in courtrooms. Countries are demanding answers. The punishment is not just monetary. It's multi-billion-dollar fines, car recalls, payments to owners. And the most painful thing is public humiliation. Reputations built over decades are shattered in an instant. And then there are personal stories. People who were once proud of their Volkswagen are now turning away. At services, they hear the question, "Did you know?" Dealers are faced with the wrath of customers. Some owners sell their cars, as if feeling that they bought not just a car, but a fraud. And in this chaos, another scene is also born, the scene of the inner voice. Engineers who wrote the code or worked on the systems walk with a heavy conscience. Some of them understand, this is wrong. And a few people begin to quietly talk about what happened. The first whistleblowers appear, pushing for the truth. It was a time of humiliation. But humiliation is also a spark. It is painful, it is loud, and it forces you to face the truth. The company is at a crossroads. You can hide, make excuses, and stand still. Or you can admit your mistake and start doing what you were afraid of, really change. And here, in this darkest moment, a choice arises. This is the moment when the characters begin to either rebuild from the lies or fall apart completely. In its darkest days, Volkswagen realized one thing: lies would inevitably find their way out. And to be reborn, it had to face the truth, not hide. The scene: a huge conference room in Wolfsburg. Cameras from around the world. The new CEO steps onto the stage. His face is serious, his voice calm but determined. He speaks the words that change everything. We made a mistake. We let you down, our customers, our employees, the world. And we will do everything we can to make it right. It was the first real admission. After months of silence, denials, and internal meetings, the company publicly admitted its mistake. The people who had been shouting shame just yesterday quieted down a bit. They sensed that the company was ready not only to pay the fines, but also to change. And a new hero appears, Matthias Müller, who headed Volkswagen after the scandal. He understood that words will not help without action. A new course: electric cars, environmental technologies, transparency. New engineers, new departments, new rules. The scene in the laboratory: white coats, high ceilings, the smell of new equipment, the noise of test engines. Here a future was born, where mistakes would be impossible or minimal. A new determination emerged in the hearts of workers and leaders. They began to understand that the crisis was not the end, but an opportunity for true transformation. And with each passing day, that opportunity came closer. A symbolic step: the company announced a large-scale investment in electric vehicles. Loud statements at conferences, presentations of new models. The world began to listen, and the first signs of trust were returning. But most importantly, changes were not only in technology, but also in the company's culture. Transparency became the new rule. And although the world's trust does not return instantly, the first steps have been taken. And right now, the story of Volkswagen's true revival begins. A story when the company begins to dream again, but now truly honestly. After the worst scandal, Volkswagen was faced with a choice: remain in the past or become a symbol of the future. And they chose the latter. The scene: a huge factory in Wolfsburg. Once hundreds of designers worked here on diesel engines, but now new workshops, new laboratories have appeared. The air smells of electronics, new batteries, and fresh metal. Here, machines are born that not only move people, but also change our attitude towards the planet. The first prototypes of electric cars, ID. 3 ID. 4, are hitting the roads. People are applauding again, but this time cautiously. The world remembers Dieselgate. And Volkswagen knows, to earn trust, you need to act, not promise. Imagine the presentation of a new model. Headlights illuminate the shiny body of the car. The leader comes out with a lofty but modest look and says, "We are no longer hiding. We are creating a future that you can trust." The audience applauds, but there is tension in the air. The past is still nearby. The company is investing billions in battery research, charging infrastructure, and new safety standards. Every step is a response to the lesson the crisis taught them: honesty and quality above all else. Engineers who once worked on a deception device are now creating systems of control and transparency. The feeling of persistence is transformed into something new: responsibility. And the world is responding. Electric vehicle sales are growing, investor interest is returning, and most importantly, some of the trust is returning. Not all of it, but enough for the company to start breathing more freely. And here is where the lesson that VW is learning most strongly comes in. True recovery begins with honesty. Only through transparency and bold decisions can we emerge from the crisis stronger. Volkswagen is starting to feel alive again, but now it knows the past cannot be forgotten. It must be remembered so as not to repeat it. the world has changed. Now a car is not just a means of transportation. It is a technology, a lifestyle, a responsibility to the planet. And Volkswagen is facing a new front in the fight. The scene, the management headquarters in Wolfsburg. Large screens showing competitors, Tesla, Chinese startups, traditional Japanese giants. On the table are printouts of reports on climate targets, on sales of electric cars in Europe and the US. Everyone looks at each other and understands. Now the main battle is for technology, ecology, and consumer trust. Volkswagen is adapting quickly. New production lines for electric cars, investments in charging stations, cooperation with startups and engineers around the world. This is where a global strategy is born. Mobilize the future to move the world in. But the challenges are not only external. Inside the company, there is a struggle between the old school, accustomed to diesel engines, and the young engineers who believe in the electric revolution. Every day is a compromise between experience and other. And while Volkswagen is regaining trust, the world is still reeling from Dieselgate. Customers look at cars and think, can they be trusted? And every car that leaves the factory carries some responsibility for the past. However, it is these challenges that make the company stronger. Every failure becomes a lesson. Every setback is motivation. And the perseverance that was at the beginning of the story is once again manifested. Not giving up, moving forward, and proving that it is possible to change even after disgrace. Volkswagen is becoming an example that a crisis is not the end, but the beginning of a new era. An era where technology, honesty, and perseverance propel the company into the future. Today, Volkswagen is not just a car brand. It is a company that has survived disgrace and reached a new level. Factories are operating, electric cars are driving around the world, and the trust that was once destroyed is gradually being restored. Scene: presentation of a new electric car on the seashore. The sun is setting, reflections on the shiny body. Engineers are smiling, journalists are capturing the moment. And most importantly, there is a feeling in everyone's hearts that previous mistakes have become a lesson. Volkswagen has shown that a crisis can be a fuel for change. Every problem, every defeat is a chance to reconsider strategy, to reconsider values, to reconsider oneself.